Hi, everybody, and welcome to Resolve to Live Forward. I'm John Morrow. I want to thank you for being a listener, a viewer, a contributor, an individual that's offering feedback, and hopefully a part of my tribe. And as I grow this, I realize that I'm only for specific people when it comes to what my message is all about. But the key thing here in this is it's important that we realize as a group the value of finding a way to move forward in a positive direction with life. My two-word purpose is live forward. But how I accomplish that has to do with equipping others to find a way to get unstuck and shift into a more vibrant and meaningful life. And steps, behaviors, personal best practices, good habits are a way to do that. Together, we'll talk about those things, and many of those items are discussed in my book, Resolve Your Blueprint for Intentional Success. And the reason why I call it intentional success is because you have to choose to do things in order to find yourself on the road to having consistency, to building momentum, to having success, and ultimately to leave a legacy. Not memories of yourself, but rather the things that you put into the lives of other people that they carry forward as they live out the legacy that you planted. I want to talk now about the letter S. In Resolve, we have 7 letters, RESOLVE. To recap, resolve, as I define it with the help of my late wife, Donna, is having a definite, firm plan of action. You know what you're going to do, and you set out to do it. Along the way, you also have immediate goals, short-term goals, intermediate goals, long-term goals, and yes, possibly an end result. As far as behaviors are concerned, these 7 letters represent personal best practices that we can practice together each and every single day. Previously, I spoke about the first letter of resolve, the letter R for resilience. It takes a stick-to-itiveness, as I like to say, the ability to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, patch any damage, and continue to move forward. Never, ever, ever stopping to fall back. And even if you fall down, you fall forward, you don't fall backwards. But the key thing is that you maintain that resilience, that steadfastness, that persistence, that intentional determination that you are going to accomplish the objective that you've set. And if it means getting unstuck, all the more. The letter E, which I spoke about in the last podcast, is about engaging life or engagement. And engagement here is the act of doing, the act of meeting people, person, place, or thing. Whatever the circumstances are, it's engage it, and engage it with a number of opportunities. One would be you need to engage it in order to move forward because it can be meaningful to someone else and it could be meaningful to you. Number 2, it may be something that you want to make note of and engage it so that you can have it in your repository for future purposes. And then it may be something that you engage so you can understand it and see if it has value. And if it doesn't, avoid it. Move in a different direction. We live in a life where we want to try to have less fight or flight, although that's going to happen. But what we want to do is we want to understand and know what the best choices are. And to engage helps you to understand how to make best choices. Brings us to the letter S. Now, the letter S is very personal, and it should be personal to you. But it's not something that's easily achieved because we're all concerned for ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that to the degree that we should be striving to take care of ourselves. The whole purpose of Resolve for me and for my wife when we created the PowerWord and then took the 7 letters and created a set of behaviors or best practices, it was to further or take our life in a forward direction and find meaningfulness. You don't have to be self-absorbed to care about yourself. But there is a point where self can be damaging and potentially destructive. And we've talked about self-centered, egotistical, even narcissistic people. And it's a part of the world we live in. But the truly great people, the great leaders, the great people that made a difference in the world were people who served others. They placed themselves subordinate to the greater goal of selfless service to those that they served and worked with. And it's interesting that the greatest leaders are servant-minded. One of the greatest leaders that we have known, and in particular in my lifetime, is Dr. Martin Luther King. Taken from us way too early, like so many other great individuals who were mightily unselfish, but determined to help people discover their own self-awareness and their value and their relevance. Dr. King was taken from us, and we could certainly benefit from more people who acted like Dr. Martin Luther King. And I included a quote from him on the chapter for the letter S for service. And the quote simply reads, "Everybody can be great because everybody can serve." If I were to add a postscript to that in the book, it would be, yes, everybody can be great because you can serve, but you have to make the choice. There's a word that often gets bounced around like a pickleball. I got to take that up, by the way. My sister gave me a pickleball set, and I think I want to learn how to play pickleball because I think it's lower impact than tennis. And I was never really good at tennis anyway. Sorry, I digress. You know how podcasts are. But the key thing here is that the situation for me is quite simply, we want to gain a foothold on understanding how to put forward our best, benefit from it, but while putting forward our best, always seeing a bigger picture. And that bigger picture is, what can I do to enhance, enlarge, and give to the people that I have the pleasure of working with, serving, or leading? What can I do to help their lives be richer, fuller, and more meaningful? And vibrancy of life creates a better sense of well-being. Just as I tell people that one of the things about me that makes me personally different, and I'm not saying you should do this, but I personally like doing it because it has helped me tremendously in my journey, especially over the last 5 years, is the idea of being unconventional. I'm 74 years of age at this current time in the recording of this podcast. At this particular time in my life, many of my peers in the same age group, we are baby boomers, those still alive, are retired. And depending upon how their retirement situation played out, they may be living the dream, or they may be trying to make ends meet. But are they having a satisfied and meaningful life? And many people arrive at a point where they run out of steam. The gas tank is near empty. Now, if you factor into it illness, grief, housing struggles, being able to have relations with family, losing a spouse, all sorts of things that can break us down. There are people whose lives right now are simply going through the motions and there's nothing meaningful happening. And they're not getting anything done. They're not serving any purpose for anybody. And sadly, they're not serving themselves either. They are just simply waiting to die. I'm unconventional. I don't want to be that way, and I don't want you to be that way either. Now, I'm not talking to just people in my age group. I'm talking to anyone who is in the same situation. And that situation simply is this all there is? Is there not something better for me to be doing? Can I not be doing more to make my life meaningful? Yes, you can be doing more to make your life meaningful. But you have to understand that mindset, through proper best practices in your behaviors and actions, are going to have a tremendous bearing upon how you penetrate new opportunities, see more clearly the chance to make connections, and be able to use better thinking, which in turn helps you to have a better life and also can help you, interestingly enough, from a cognitive point of view, to have a healthier mind. Now, there are always going to be issues in life as we get older with the breakdown of our physical bodies. And there are some things out there in life that I have had to confront. My mother, for example, one of the most brilliant and wonderful people I ever met, who, by the way, was a tremendous role model to me personally, because after she retired from work, she spent 13 years caring for her mother. And her mother had Alzheimer's, and it was the type of Alzheimer's back in the day where she did not have a living will or an advance directive. So when she became completely indigent, her money ran out and she needed care, and she was too much to bear for family to care for her. She was institutionalized in a state-run nursing facility where she was pretty much put into a bed, was in a vegetative state. And even when she could not eat or swallow any longer, but she was still breathing, nothing else was going on, but she was still breathing. The motor senses, which are among the last things to go, were still operational because they're automatic. They put a tube in her stomach and they put food into her body. And so she laid there for years and never said a word, never made a sound, nothing. And then she finally died simply because the Alzheimer's finished its horrible work and destroyed the last vestiges of her brain. And those were the ones that made her organs operate. My mother would be afflicted with the same problem. And I set myself to a learning process, but in that learning process, I also realized I needed to serve my mother. And think about it for a second. She raised me as an infant, a newborn, in diapers, and cleaned me and cared for me and took me all the way through the maturation process to adulthood until I got married in 1973 and moved away and started living on my own, and I became a father. But my mother continued after she retired and caring for her mother. When her mother finally died, Mom went back to college and graduated from college at the age of 61 with a degree in nursing and became a registered nurse. Why? Because she was not content to stop being useful. And for her, the greatest gift was helping others. She served. But she too became afflicted with Alzheimer's, and it came to my life in two ways. One, is it possible that I could get this? Because as I learned through the journey, this was a disease that ravaged my mom's family on her side. Now, there was no vestige of that disease on my dad's side of the family, but on mom's, it was rampant. But in learning about it, I set myself to understand it, and I submitted myself for the opportunity to find out if, in fact, I might have that trait genetically in me. I'm happy to report, based upon the studies, research, and care that I received, I don't have it. But knowing that, I still had to learn the process of watching, understanding, and caring for my mother, as did my sister. And we were her fundamental caregivers until she became too much to care for at home and no longer could be cared for at her home and had to be put into a brain care institutional facility. Eventually, mother would wane, and finally she would pass away. But we did everything to keep her comfortable. But it was important to remember that a once brilliant, beautiful mind was robbed by a terrible disease. I say all that to remind you, you can borrow those potential thoughts and think to yourself, what's the use of trying to be unconventional and do something and learn something new? What's the use? I'm just going to die anyway. Well, you're right to the degree that we all, I think, have an expiration date. But does that expiration date have to dictate how we define our lives? I don't think so. As a matter of fact, I steadfastly refuse to believe that. But I've also found that as I learn things and as I realize abilities that I have in giftedness, I'm able to put those to use in service to others. This too is what you can do. We are a part of the same tribe. We do want to be functional. We do want to be relevant. We want to be useful and to make a difference and an impact. And that can come across in any one of dozens of opportunities. But knowing that alone is not enough. To be able to make it truly pay forward and make a difference, and as John Maxwell says, create a legacy that isn't just about you, but about what you are to people as they carry you forward in their lives to make a difference. And so serving others is not menial. Now, there are many, many people in history who have sacrificed incredibly. Dr. King gave his life for a cause that we still struggle with. But if we go back to him and we read, there is massive wisdom and power in that. But we have to work at it. Mother Teresa, she was always in want, and yet, as much as she gave everything she had to help the suffering people in India, she never was without, because her authenticity and unselfishness not only served the needs of others, but it served as a role model and as a template for better living. She was the quintessential example of best practices to advance the cause of making humanity better. Wouldn't you like to be able to have that kind of an impact upon people? I would like to hope that those of you who are part of this community, that in your why, there is this desire to punch a dent into eternity through a life well lived. And it doesn't have to matter about what you've done in the past. We can all look back and see where we have messed up, big time, royally messed up. But did we learn? The longer I live, the more I realize that the mistakes, the failures, the bad choices, the real mess ups in life created opportunities. And if we stopped, looked, listened, and learned, we could then redirect and do even better things in life and begin to make a difference through the lessons that we've learned. And those come through all kinds of opportunities. You don't have to be in business for yourself. You can be a full-time employee at a company punching a clock every day. You serve your company and you follow the orders and directions and you fulfill your job description. But while there, you have an opportunity to make a positive impact, not just on the company that provides you with your means of living, but you can make an impact upon the lives which you have contact with as customers, the employees that you actually work with, and outside of your business, the people you come in contact with through all the other possibilities that are there. Because as I said, when we talk about engaging life, every day, opportunities to engage come, and it's going to be persons, places, or things. And how we engage them can be a learning process. But how we engage them should also have an element of selfless desire to cast something positive in service to others. I should write that down, but it's true. However, it wasn't always the way I lived. And it may be the case for you as well, but now you're seeing, hey, there's got to be something better. When you resolve, when you have a definite, firm plan of action, and you have a set of behaviors that you're going to apply on a day-by-day basis, the idea of service to others is not about cowering or allowing yourself to be humiliated. I want to pause for a moment and point out, life can be really, really nasty. And you're going to encounter circumstances and, sadly, people who are so self-absorbed, so narcissistic that they become almost, and in many cases, absolutely sociopathic. And you need to avoid those kinds of situations because a lot of how we become is defined by who we keep company with and where we go. And in talking about the I never noticed concept that I share, where I talk about the 5 senses and the power of those senses, we are sensory creatures, and we're connected to the most amazing piece of equipment that has ever been created in the universe, the human brain. It is also important to remember that even if we're asleep or unconscious, the brain is still operating and there are sensory functions taking place. And even though we might not cognitively notice these things, they are being stored. I know that in the book Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about a thing called the adaptive unconscious. And it's interesting because I've experienced it through something that years ago, back in the 80s, when I was listening to 80s and not the 80s, the 70s rock and roll. I was listening to Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. As a matter of fact, Neil Young was with the group at that time. And they had an album called Deja Vu. And I always wondered what deja vu was. And then somebody told me deja vu is that eerie sense that I've been here before. It seems familiar, even though to the best of your ability and knowledge, you can't recall that particular moment taking place. And what it is, Malcolm Gladwell in his book Blink says it's something like an event that occurred that your senses picked up on, but you didn't consciously connect with. But it was stored nonetheless. And then a stimuli rose along years later, decades later, and suddenly the doorway in that adaptive unconscious, where a lot of those unconscious memories are stored, this one comes rushing forward because it's been stimulated to come forward. And you say to yourself, boy, that's familiar. That's eerily familiar. Well, this is us. We are sensory creatures. And we have to control our senses as to what we allow ourselves as we grow to take in and be around. Because we do become what we are most often connected to. Think about it. If we eat the wrong kind of food, we will become an unhealthy individual because we're eating unhealthy. It's naturally going to happen. You are what you eat. If you hang around negative people, you're going to become a negative person because it's going to rub off on you. It can't be helped. If you watch troubling, difficult, disruptive, divisive, upsetting, disturbing television, and it can be anything from news to movies to porn, you're going to become that. If you are in situations where your senses are being assaulted by negative forces, they are going to naturally become a part of the framework of who you are as a human being. You have to take care of you. And to do that, you have to surround yourself with the right kinds of influences and stimuli. And part of the idea of serving is to become more connected with people who you can serve, but also who themselves enjoy the opportunity to serve and who are eager to partner with you, work with you, counsel with you, learn with you, grow with you in the area of making the lives of other people better. Service is an incredible value. Among people that I know who are incredibly service-minded, but who also pay a very, very high price for it, is those who are first responders. And I know that first responders are some of the most challenged people in the world because they are assaulted by very, very gruesome images. They are people that have sacrificed. Many, many people have sacrificed. And if there's anything that we can do as servant-minded people, it is to do what we can to contribute to their lives as well, and to be there to stand fast with them and helping them as they overcome any trauma that they're going through. One of the reasons why I took educational training in grief counseling was because the lessons that I learned through the counseling that I received, which helped me mightily in my grief journey after my wife died in 2019, these gave me purpose for moving forward. I didn't move past the grief. I took the grief, I redefined it so that it did not control my emotions, and I moved it out of that reactive mindset and into a mindset where I could objectively look at it. And as I confronted situations that were heartbreaking, or situations where I was confronted with the opportunity to help someone who was going through the same kind of grieving process, I would be able to be useful, and I would be able to know how to serve them, even if that service meant simply being present and silent. But that's just a couple of things that I share based upon the journey I'm on. Where are you in your journey right now? Part of how you can begin to create a system of best practices through the power of resolve, that definite, firm plan of action, is to remember that resilience ties into all of this. That resilience is necessary for you to be able to see, hear, sense, feel, touch, and understand the situation and know how to best engage it. And then, if the opportunity to serve to the benefit of others is present, then get to the business of serving, while at the same time remembering, take care of yourself too. Just don't do it at the expense of other people. The greatest leaders are the most unselfish people, but make no mistake about it. They take care of themselves and they care for those that they love. And they, above all else, place the priorities of those things in their lives that are going to help them be the most effective and the most caring for the things in their life that matter. It's that kind of service that you want to practice. And in a way, as a call to action, the simplest thing you can do to begin the mindset of being servant-hearted is when you go out and do a regular routine thing. May I suggest this? This week, when you go to the grocery store or to the department store or to any place of business, even a governmental location where you're paying an electric bill or a gas bill or a phone bill, or you have a conversation on the phone where you're taking care of business and you're talking to a service representative, say thank you. Say it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your service. If there's ever anything I can do for you, please let me know. Plant a seed. Plant a seed that will give them something that will spring up in their life, that will give them comfort and will make them smile. It's kind of like giving people flowers, except these flowers are emotional flowers because you did something completely without any desire to satisfy your own personal needs. That is selfless service. And from there, the opportunities, I assure you, I am confident, will just keep coming and coming and coming. You can never do enough for others, but in doing for others, you will reap rewards you had no idea or could have ever imagined. It's a wonderful thing to share with you and to talk with you about this and our podcast, Resolve to Live Forward. Remember that mantra, living forward, always moving forward. Learning from experiences, don't dwell on the past all that much. Learn from it. Live in the now as much as you can, because today is the only thing that you have that you can do anything with. And try your very, very best to reduce the temptation to worry about things that in all likelihood will probably not happen. So why waste a perfectly good today on something that hasn't happened and may not happen? Service, service. We talked about the first three letters of the PowerWord, resolve. When I join you for our next episode of Resolve to Live Forward, we will talk about the middle letter in resolve, that big letter O. And that O is important because I've struggled with it perhaps more than anything else. I hope you'll join me because I want to share with you things that I've learned, while at the same time, if you're following me in this podcast, I want to hear what you have to say as well. If you want to know more, just check out my website, johnmorrowcoaching.com. That's johnmorrowcoaching.com. And as for my email, that's john@johnmorrowcoaching.com. john@johnmorrowcoaching.com. I'm also available on Facebook and LinkedIn. And now I'm starting to also do a John's Bookshelf piece on a weekly basis on TikTok. For now, though, this episode is closed. Thanks for joining me. I'm grateful that you're a part of my community and that I can be a part of yours. Find your why. Let's get together. Let's talk it through, and let's move forward and live the best life we can possibly live, but always live it today and don't put off to tomorrow what you can do today. John Morrow saying so long and thank you so very much.